Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Menil Drawing Institute. We're so happy to have you here tonight for our special performance. My name is Mary Magsman. I'm the manager of public programs. Before we begin, just a quick reminder to please turn off or silence your cell phones. We are recording tonight's program, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Last night, we were really honored to host a dynamic conversation between artist Ronny Quevedo, who made this wall drawing, and Xochitl Gonzalez, an author. They spoke about personal histories, art, portals, lines, literally and conceptually, and the shape of their work. We are delighted that Ronny can be here tonight again with us in the audience to experience Threads and Traces, a performance created in direct response to his wall drawing over here, Cara a Cara. I've been looking forward to this evening as another way to inform Ronny's work through the lens of three remarkable Houston-based artists. Their practices span sound, movement, and performance. Anthony Almendarez is an artist and composer whose interdisciplinary work investigates politics of sound and listening through experimental media. His work has been presented internationally, and he holds degrees in music education from California State University, music theory and composition from Marshall University, and an MFA in music and sound from Bard. Gabriel Martinez is an artist, writer, and performer whose work explores the body's relationship to place and history. He holds an MFA from Columbia University, and he's participated in the Whitney Independent Study Program, the core program at the MFAH, and a residency at Project Row Houses. He is also the founding director of Alabama Song, an experimental arts space. Paty Lorena Solórzano is a choreographer and movement artist whose practice draws on improvisation, environmental psychology, and embodied memory. She holds a BFA from Texas Christian University and an MFA from University of Michigan, and has presented her work across Mexico, US, and Europe. We're also joined tonight by our wonderful colleague, Ben Doyle, who will serve as a kind of silent fourth performer. He's going to be moving through the space with his camera as a means to document tonight's performance. Following the performance, we'll have a brief Q&A, so we invite you to stay for that and engage with our artists. So thank you again for being here, and please enjoy Threads and Traces.
Caretaker, cook.
Student, advisor, therapist of sorts. ESL tutor.
Student,
Advisor, musician,
advisor,
Musician, caretaker, cook.
Cat sitter, babysitter.
composer,
drawing instructor,
House sitter,
caretaker,
student,
cook,
waitress,
therapist of sorts,
composer,
salesman,
musician,
babysitter,
park caretaker,
babysitter,
cat sitter,
administrative coordinator,
cat sitter,
teacher's
house sitter,
aide, substitute teacher,
house sitter,
student,
student,
trumpeter,
filmmaker,
adjunct faculty,
point shoe fitter,
filmmaker,
Cook.
retail,
retail
sales
Advisor.
associate, point shoe fitter,
salesman,
editor-in-chief, salesman, waitress, THC salesperson,
teacher,
waitress,
graduate student instructor,
assembly worker, stagehand,
stagehand, usher,
stagehand, usher,
assembly worker,
assembly worker,
usher, musician, park caretaker, dance teacher, yoga
park
instructor,
caretaker,
writing
Mentor.
instructor,
dance teacher,
professor,
yoga instructor,
dance professor,
administrative coordinator,
administrative coordinator,
artistic director,
administrative assistant,
administrative assistant,
administrative assistant,
teacher's aide,
teacher's aide,
substitute teacher,
substitute
teacher's
teacher,
aide, substitute teacher, graphic designer,
stagehand, usher,
dance teacher, yoga instructor,
trumpeter, dancer, choreographer,
trumpeter, dancer, choreographer, sign painter,
artist,
teacher, graduate student, instructor,
teacher, graduate student, instructor, truck driver,
mentor, visiting
Mentor.
professor,
Teacher.
mentor,
dance professor,
trumpeter,
visiting
dancer,
professor, dance professor,
artist director,
artistic director, art handler, artist,
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 Nací y crecí en Morelia, Michoacán, México. Una de 3 hijas.
I grew up in South Central LA
Nací y crecí en Morelia,
in
Michoacán,
tightly knit
México.
apartments,
Una de 3 hijas.
neighbors on both sides, and 6 cousins.
De una familia donde
Crammed
las
into a
mujeres
studio.
siempre tuvieron que resolver.
The first generation of children born
Los
in the
hombres
United
tenían la
States
tendencia de desaparecer.
from a long line of campesinos,
Mi madre, igual que su madre,
Of
igual que
field
su madre,
workers.
igual que su madre,
workers,
igual que su madre, igual que su madre, igual que su madre, igual que su madre. The first generation of children born in the United States.
nací y
Of
crecí
field workers
en Morelia, Michoacán, México.
from a long line of campesinos. De clase media.
Una de 3
Baja.
hijas de una familia donde las mujeres siempre tuvieron
Con
que resolver,
educación, pero viviendo en México.
ya que los hombres tenían
Un
la
ciclo
tendencia,
vicioso de apenas
de
alcanzar a
desaparecer.
pagar la luz, el gas, la
Mi madre,
despensa,
igual que su madre,
la luz,
igual
el
que su
gas,
madre.
la despensa,
igual que su madre,
la luz, el gas, la despensa,
de clase media,
la
baja,
luz, el gas, la despensa.
con educación, pero viviendo en
Entre
México,
buscar trabajo o inventarse algún emprendimiento
trampa.
para sobrevivir. La luz,
un ciclo vicioso
el gas,
de apenas
la despensa.
alcanzar a pagar la luz, el gas, la despensa.
Great grandma, great grandpa,
Entre buscar
grandma,
trabajo
grandpa, mom,
o
dad,
inventarse algún emprendimiento para sobrevivir.
mother, sister, brother, aunts, uncles,
Fue así que mi madre
cousins.
decidió que ella
She
quería algo
left
más.
her mother, sister,
She
brother,
immigrated to the United
aunts,
States,
uncles, cousins.
not knowing anyone, far away from family,
To list a few,
and with little resources
most of whom
Except-
never finished school.
for her unwavering resolve
Great grandma,
and desire to make
great grandpa.
a better life for herself,
Grandma, grandpa, mom,
and her
dad,
3 daughters.
mother, sister, brother, aunts, uncles, cousins.
great grandma, great grandpa, grandma, grandpa,
To go where?
mom, dad. She
To
left
go
her.
where, maybe.
She left her mother, sister, brother,
They
aunts,
could find
uncles,
work,
cousins, to list a
make
few,
their education,
most of whom
their skills,
never
their
finished school.
passion matter more.
Her entire network to go where?
To go where?
To go where?
To go where?
Maybe
To go where?
Maybe she could find work and make her education, her skills, and her
Their
passion
education, their skills,
matter more.
their passion
Matter more.
matter more. For as long as I can remember, I had an itch to move. The worlds they offered, the imagination,
I was passionate about music, movies,
dance, and
And
fantasy
television.
books offered an escape.
the worlds they offered, the
The
imagination.
worlds they offered, the imagination.
I loved to dance. For as long as I can remember, I had an itch to move
Drawn in by the simplicity,
and express what I felt
the
with my
animation, the
body.
humor, the music. In these
Hanna-Barbera.
complex
Disney,
yet simple worlds,
Looney Tunes.
there was magic. There were quests
The worlds they offered,
and battles between good and evil. But
imagination.
none of the characters looked
dance and fantasy
like
books
me, nor
offered
sounded
an
like
escape
me, nor had
from the
stories like me.
violence and unpredictability of our new lives in the United States. Drawn in by the simplicity, the animation,
Television,
the humor, and the music.
films, and pop culture.
In these complex yet simple worlds, there was magic. There were quests and battles between good and evil. Though none of the characters
looked like me, nor sounded like me, nor had stories like me.
Television, films, and pop culture, these provided an escape for me, for many people,
from the daily routine.
It wasn't until years later that I began to be conscious
of the racial undertones deeply embedded, wrapped in humor, in the imagery, narratives, and music and sounds,
used to make them more palatable. I think of the nuanced,
layered,
and complex realities
in how
one constructs identity,
or how identity is constructed for you. The influence of mass media and the effects of its misrepresentation and erasure,
the distinctions between official narratives,
marginalized histories, and subjective
memories. While I may not have the privilege or the luxury to trace my ancestry further back than 2 generations, I have learned,
and more importantly, unlearned
much.
The body is our cultural, familiar, shared memories are an archive.
How the body is an archive. Of our
cultural, familiar, shared memories, movements, lineages.
How our histories,
cultural traditions,
and personal experiences
are registered, transmitted, felt. What does it mean to be represented?
What does it mean to be represented?
Trace back the path. Thread back
the connections. My past experiences have illustrated a clear separation between my life as a musician,
a dancer, as an artist,
and my everyday life.
And yet, the choreography of everyday life reminds me that it is impossible to separate my lived experience. It is impossible to separate it, the work from the work.
A clear separation
because of
one of class and economic status. One of alienation. Where is the representation, the support, the acknowledgement, the attention of Central America, of the Caribbean diaspora? Why do we keep playing the same music, dancing the same dance,
painting the same landscapes, dancing the same dance?
That's been her time.
Same music.
And again. Why do we continue
sounds.
to uphold the same composers, artists,
dancing the same dance,
when new ones emerge every day? These institutions were not made for us. Classical and orchestral music was not made for us. Concert dance was not made for us. But through us, they perpetuate. They are relics of a time past, music reclaimed for patriarchal societies.
Disciplined bodies, docile bodies.
Disciplined bodies,
Bodies.
docile bodies. One where class, distinction, and privilege rule.
8 hours of work, 8 hours of recreation, 8 hours of sleep. I remember the first time that I heard the 8-hour work slogan was in high school. I remember my teacher saying, well, actually he laughed when he said that our work, 8 hours of work, should be replaced with 8 hours of school. To me, I think what shocked me the most was the fact that the timing of it was so precise. It fit nicely into a 24-hour schedule. How did we get here? Human, acting like machine, repeating an endless cycle of work and consumption. Because in my memory, in my experience, my mom, my dad never worked just 8 hours. My friends never worked just 8 hours. I never worked just 8 hours.
How do we move forward? How do we reclaim ownership of our own bodies, our own labor, and the fruit of our labor?
How do we
How
survive
do we recalibrate society
in a society
to view the creation,
that grows increasingly violent?
performance, transmission, and preservation of culture as labor and as having value?
How do we redefine productivity to include the immaterial and material labor of Black bodies, brown bodies, indigenous bodies, female and femme bodies, queer and trans bodies, able and disabled bodies, poor and working class bodies? How do we decenter whiteness and continue reimagining new visualities, intermedialities, and alternative potential futures? I hope that in unlearning
You're listening.
and undergoing this process of de-anesthesia,
You can
Provide
provide
a
a counterbalance
counterbalance
of the
of
sensitive by
sensitive.
promoting a kind of pedagogy of being.
one in which we relearn to listen to the world,
Listen to the world. Perceive
to feel its
ourselves
sensitive
as
atmosphere,
As part of an entanglement
and
that
perceive ourselves
co-composes the places
Perceive
we inhabit
ourselves as
as
part
an entanglement.
of an entanglement.
that co-composes the places we inhabit.
I want to say thank you to the Menil for inviting us, Mary, Tony, Mike. You've been carrying this name for forever, Ben. Man, trumpet is heavy, but I can imagine this. Thank you guys for attending. Thank you, Ronny, for this drawing and for inviting us here. I do believe we might have a Q&A. So yeah, if you have any questions, or Mary, if you want to come down here. But if you have any questions, feel free. We can answer as best as we can, and yeah, sure.
Can you tell us how you generated the text?
Yes, the text. So the text originally started as kind of a couple years ago, to be honest. Some of it is text that I wrote. The beginning part of it is text that I wrote for a thesis statement. And then that thesis statement has kind of informed a lot of my work. And then it started evolving when I started having a conversation with both Gabriel and Paty. And I shared the document with them and asked them if they could read through, if they could write a little bit about what they were thinking, if there was anything that kind of they wanted or spoke to them. And we kind of co-composed this text together. And then I had, I'll let them explain what they also did.
Oh. Okay. I honestly, it's Anthony's text. But we, I think, just responded
to the text and added a little bit of our own stories, but really this is came from Anthony. Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, also to just share a little bit, I think what spoke to me a lot about when I was looking at this drawing and Mary first approached and asked if I was interested in doing a performance, I think seeing this, I could see a lot of the history behind some of the gestures of the lines, and it really brought to me this idea of the trace, like how a trace is always left behind. And I started really thinking about lines and how do lines appear in our life. I started really thinking about how lines can be found anywhere, gestures, sounds, music, our lives, our movement. The way that we think about time is linear. And so I was like, all of these aspects are linear. But then to me, it felt like lines are also made, created. And if we could start to really think about that in terms of lines of ideology or beliefs or politics, then we can start to take off some of those shackles that kind of are imposed on us or box us in. And you can start to explore new ways of thinking. And to me, that was kind of valuable. I don't know, I'm gonna pass this down. I don't know if this is a lot of information, so stop me when it becomes too much. But I guess my own question was, what did you think of lines?
I guess I can speak a little bit about the movement.
Yes.
Because I came in as a dancer, and when I read Anthony's text and some of the ideas that he was grappling with, I thought about how that also appears in the way we move in everyday, the everyday labor, like making these tasks as repetitive tasks, or how we move through space, and sometimes we have these near misses or connections, and so like what we leave behind, how we can connect, and so all of these intersections that sometimes we might not even be aware of, and so that was the impetus for some of the movement scores, and then also just thinking about our own bodies, like how sometimes they're measured, or sometimes in a good way, like we have this, for clothing or whatever, but sometimes these measurements can like be imposed, and really bodies are all different and they're all interesting, and so I think there's something about that, how bodies interact, or how we interact with bodies, or how we measure bodies, and so that was some of the ideas behind the movement. Yeah.
I will. I think we were thinking about lines and drawing and the Drawing Institute, but Anthony's lines on the trumpet were lyrical, kind of linear sort of musical phrases, and I was kind of noise stuff, kind of clouds of sound, and then your movements were also sort of linear. And we just took that in all the directions. It kind of came up over the times we got together and talked through it. So the tape and the drawing without leaving a mark, and then pulling the tape up, kind of matching Ronnie's, not exactly, but the sort of scale of the piece here on the floor. And just being artists as, activating an artwork is kind of, you're kind of in the service industry. So, we're bussing tables with the glasses, and we're moving, doing the labor of like setting up all the stuff, and kind of pulling that labor into the piece. I think that's about all I can say before I start to go on a rant.
Yeah.
please ask questions. Otherwise, I will not be direct.
Mine's kind of simple and not that deep, but I'm just out of curiosity. The tape that you chose, I understand like it's electrical tape and it's or something along like easy to pull up, but did the color of the tape have an effect on like what you guys were trying to create, or like because you could have used duct tape, scotch tape, washi tape, like all sorts of things to create a similar atmosphere, or was it the sound of the tape on the paper? Like what was the choice in the tape?
I think this also came from a much larger discussion. I'm not kidding you when I say that we had a long discussion about what kind of tape we should use. I think honestly it came from Paty, because we were really having a really long discussion, way more than we should have. And Paty at some point said, spike tape. And we had all worked at some point in a theater, and spike tape is used to like mark or delineate where something belongs. And as soon as that was said aloud, I think all of us were like, yeah, that makes sense. And then when I went to like look for spike tape, I realized there is a lot of colors in spike tape. And I'm one that likes colors. I don't wear them in my clothes, but I like seeing them. And so I definitely I just bought all the different color types of spike tape that you can buy. There's a glow-in-the-dark one, but it wouldn't have worked for this occasion. But yeah, that's how we came to the tape.
Also, it's just fun.
Yeah, it's just really colorful, and I think once we saw colors, then we're like, oh, now we know which ones is our lines, where our marks, essentially.
Hey y'all. Congratulations, Anthony, Paty, and Gabe. Two of the words that stood out to me in the audio was de-anesthesia and co-composition. Could you speak a little bit more about the audio and speech component? It's interesting we called it a text because it's something I guess I was hearing, but we know that you're reading, and its interplay with the improvisational elements.
I think these are my words. Okay, so I try to keep this short, but because the concept of de-anesthesia is also something that I'm constantly battling with, but I decided to use it here. For me, I have felt for a long time now that we have so much in this era of time with technology. We have so much technology available to us that we have started to become numb to it. And because we are numb to it, we're consistently being overloaded, and we start to lose attention and the focus where focus should actually be played or given to. And so the concept of de-anesthesia was an idea of like letting go of like this detachment that we have and actually focusing on a singular thing. Let's listen to the surrounding that we're in, to this environment that we're in. And that actually comes from like some of the teachings that I learned through Paty Lorena Solórzano, which was when we enter a space, you're not actually making music. Music already exists there. And so that sound that's happening in the space is already active. You're simply entering the space. So then how do we enter that space? And that idea of how do we enter the space, how are we responding to where we're at, who's around us, what is available to us, then changes the way that you're kind of thinking of the spaces that you're in. And you start to think about, how am I interacting? How am I threading? How am I composing this sonic score that we're all actively participating in, whether conscious or not? And I think that once you start thinking about that process of de-anesthesia and co-composing, then you really start to understand, as like when we look at this drawing, how the entanglement exists in all forms of aspects of our lives. So that's the two. Please ask more.
I just wanted to ask how you, Anthony and Gabe, came into play movement when you are mainly musicians, but how did you fit into the movements, and how did you come up with the movements to be like a trio?
I'm gonna let Gabe answer this.
I think watching almost, out of the corner of your eye, this sort of pace and tempo, the density of movement, whether it's really slow, fluid, or whether they're smaller, things, you kind of follow. It's just like listening with other musicians when you improvise. You want to be attuned to what they're doing. You don't really want to copy what they're doing, but you want to, kind of work with it, harmonize, or push against it. And so for me, I think it's the same sort of process. I kind of close out a lot of, the extra stuff, and I'm seeing Paty move and Anthony move out of the corner of my eyes. So it's kind of like hearing them, play also. And that determines, the sort of ebb and flow of the density of my mark making and movements. What about you?
I think this one's also easy to answer. It's just Paty. Actually, it also goes back, but I think it was the mark that kind of like gave me permission in a way. I think it really started back when there was two dancers from France who came here through diverse works that did an entire movement work, and I was invited to do a contact improvisation with them. This was the first time that I did improvisation outside of my trumpet, my instrument. And I think that was so odd and freeing that I was very moved by it. And I thought, why am I not doing this more often? Like, why as a musician, my body is very active. As you can see, I sweat a lot. Why not just go all the way and sweat while I'm moving too? No, I'm just kidding. But that process of wanting to move and free the body, because I feel that as a trumpet player, I am consistently in one spot and I don't move. And I didn't want to do a piece where like I'm playing my trumpet and I'm just doing this and moving around, because I did that in marching band and I felt like I don't want to repeat my marching band years. And so after like working with Paty, I realized I just needed someone who I can trust to give me the push that I need. And trust me, a push was needed. Because moving is not something I do normally in performance, and this was a struggle. I think the entire time, even till now, I'm being reminded the gaze, like look at people's eyes, don't look at the floor. And so yeah, that's how the movement came about. Maybe you want to talk about this.
All I'll say is that, I believe, movement and music are sort of the same thing. Sound is movement, movement is sound, and everybody already moves. So I didn't really have to teach anything. I just had to remind them that they could. That's it. Yeah.
What up, yo?
I have a question around the outfit choices. I feel like, everything seems to be very intentional, and I want to hear about the conversation around that. Yeah.
I'm just going to let you answer this one.
Well, we were talking a lot about labor and mostly blue-collar labor. And so that's part of, very obviously, why we chose blue, but then also the drawing has blue in it. And so that's why we chose this shirt. Also, I didn't want, even I'm the only female here, and so I didn't want us to be dressing different. I wanted us to dress the same. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We were all instructed to dress schlubby. So there was no spandex. Anthony was like, I need my spandex. And we're like, no. We're going to wear the button downs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will also add that the conversation actually was brought up by Paty when she said, "What are we wearing?" And most of you know me here. I never put thought into that. I'm a musician, like performance black. And that's part of why that also came about. Yes.
So we'll make this the last question. So here you go.
Thank you. Also, great performance, guys. I had a question specifically about the crate. I noticed that it never fit into any of the intentional squares that you guys made. Was that intentional? I'm kind of assuming yes, but I want to leave it open-ended and let you guys respond to that.
Originally, we outlined our stuff because the tape question, that it's to mark on a stage where you would walk out, or if you have equipment, they would put it around the feet of the chair or the drum or whatever, so you would know when the curtain's drawn, you could run out and put it there. And then we stopped outlining. We kind of just did these, angled things. And so it kind of just evolved from that. And some of the, we each use a different color of tape, which kind of, we devise our own sort of movement. We're kind of composing in that section because then we follow these spots, or we can use them to draw us through the sort of grid, invisible grid of the paper. So it kind of evolved from being accurate, where we would tape the outline, like a chalk outline, and then we just started going crazy with T's and L's and crosses, and they kind of look like baseball bases to me, that one.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys want to answer that.
Yeah, I think I sort of, I played around with things not quite fitting with this box. That score in my head just sort of emerged, sort of thinking about mundane, repetitive tasks, or something not quite fitting, or having the labor of having to move, but this thing, but what's the purpose? And so that's kind of where that came from me. Yeah, but yeah, I would say, yeah.
I think, to be honest, this is the first time that we run it where it doesn't fit in a square. And it was kind of, I did notice, now that I'm thinking back on it, the square that we would put it in was progressively getting smaller. And I don't know if that was intentional. But as this performance unfolded, I realized, well, this doesn't fit in the box. And then it kind of worked in a way, so it was just all right, it doesn't fit, okay, we don't fit. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for your performance, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.